Hello.
Shalom Aleichem, everybody.
Yes.
From
Hello,
Shalom.
Artie. Hello, Mario.
Yaakov. I was at Shaarei Tzedek this Shabbos
Ah,
because I had a Shalom Zacher for my grandson.
oh, Mazel Tov. That's right. That's right. I saw it. Yeah.
But I saw your past president plaque is very prominently displayed there. That was really nice to see.
Oh, thank you.
That's quite a
No
while
bris,
ago.
no bris, Ernie?
You know, I was president of Young Israel of Hancock Park exactly the same time.
Oh, really? Wow.
Isn't
So
that
we both
interesting?
suffered. We both suffered similarly.
I
guess.
did suffer. It was the economic, right? There was like a little bit of an economic downturn then. So I remember it was not so easy.
Ernie, was there a bris?
No, no break. He was 3 weeks premature.
Oh, okay.
So he still hasn't left the hospital. He still gets some respiratory support because the lungs are immature. He's doing okay, but it's better but
Yeah.
he'll probably be there for a little longer.
Mazel tov to you, Ernie.
Thank you.
Rosh Hashanah.
Thank you very much. So I want to start again on page 123, which is, we dealt with Kriyas HaTorah, and we went through the Makoros, but we want to learn through some of the current poskim, what they say about Kriyas HaTorah. We're talking about physically being present. We're going to learn about Zoom in another series of lectures, but this is, we want to see what the current poskim say about that. So let's learn again what Rav Moshe Sternbuch said. We did this, but by going through it again, it'll sort of get us back where we need to be as we proceed tonight. We've seen so far the poskim of the previous generations dealt with the case of a person who cannot follow along with the Baal Koreh, either because they were blind, they couldn't read. So how do these arguments relate to our current reality where people cannot follow the Baal Koreh due to social distancing? If the person is standing 6 feet away from the Torah, he's not reading along. So we had the various opinions. So Rav Moshe Sternbuch wrote a response regarding porch minyanim, where people were forbidden to come to the porch where the Sefer Torah was being read, but he permitted people receiving aliyot and reciting brachot from their porches, even though they were not able to see the reading inside, due to the principle of shomer ka'oneh. He says the people who are separated by their porches could be mitzaref to a minyan if they're shiamdubim or poses. They stand on their balcony, view royim elu, say as long as they can see each other. Ule'inyan aliyah Torah, baliyot rishonot yaleh bal koire. The first aliyah, the bal koire who's reading should get it. Or other people who are in that porch where the Torah is being read. For the next aliyahs, you could also have a person who might be across the street on a different balcony. They hear the kriya. Now, because they're across the street, they certainly cannot read inside the Torah along with the Baal Koreh. Because Corona is an emergency situation, it's not lechatchila, but it's a shasat chag. Efshar lismoch al dasa gra that the Mishnah Brewer brought, the summa yachol alis l'Torah l'didei avshena kor b'Torah, who paskin that a blind person could be called to the Torah even though he's not reading along. U'l'didei ein ha'ola l'Torah tzarich likro yachad im bal korah d'shomei k'oneh. Because the Gra is holding that the person who gets the aliyah doesn't have to read together, since hearing is like speaking. That's what shomer ka'oneh means. It's like you said it. So since by hearing it, it's as if you said it, even though you're not reading along with him. Now, we're used to the custom that the person who's getting called for Aliyah goes up to the Sefer Torah and is right next to there. But he says that custom, L'das hagra inu mishum kavod haTorah. Ach ein zeh meikar dinei habracha. It's not part of the din of the bracha that you have to be there. You could be at your seat and make the bracha, and you listen to the laning and shomer kona. But that's b'shas adchag. He says it would work. Uvenidon didan de'ein efsharut alechet l'sefer Torah shaper yachol levarich. So the Moadim Uzmanim, Rav Moshe Sternbuch says that you can do it. According to Rav Sternbuch, the conclusion of Mishnah Berurah, based on the Gra, cited at the end of the previous section, is that when necessary, anyone may receive an aliyah, even if they cannot read from the Sefer Torah to Shomer Ko'ina, who is different than the Bir Halacha, who said that this allowance is limited to cases of potential impairment. Now, Rav Asher Weiss disagrees with this pshat and this psak of Rav Sternbuch. He holds that even if a blind person can receive an aliyah, the olah must be in close proximity to the Sefer Torah. Therefore, those on different porches in a porch minyan who are standing distant from the Sefer Torah may not receive aliyot. Instead, Rav Weiss recommends practically that the Balkor receive all the aliyot, as in the case where only one person knows how to read from the Torah. Umasha kosav echad agdoilim, the kiven shnoagim b'nei Ashkenaz lalo suma Torah, that the minhag of the Ashkenazim that a blind person could be called for an aliyah, k'moshe kosav aramah, like the Ramah, hu adin b'misha oime b'merpesach acheret, and that if a blind person could be called, it should be the same din for somebody standing on a different balcony, ain't near a klal. He's disputing directly with Rav Sternbuch. Rav Weiss says you got to stand there, which you cannot do if you're not close. And for example, if you just call a person's name, and that's considered an aliyah, masha'enir klal dati, which he doesn't hold with, akoti nira de'ena yochel levarech. He wouldn't, even you would call him up, he wouldn't be able to make the bracha. If neither the meaning is that a blind person does go up and makes the bracha, ein l'chai lechidusho v'havadu lo losif alei. So that's the chiddush regarding the Mogen Avram had regarding a blind person. We should limit ourselves to that specific chiddush and don't add other things like it. Ukvar kosav Mogen Avram the suma amaretz lo yale. A blind person who's not a Talmid Chacham should not get an aliyah. Ulal niyas daiti gam kein b'nidon didon, and he thinks it's the same thing here. Omnam. Avshi yefshel alis l'toira mishnimtza b'richuk makom mikol makom nira pitaron l'kriyas haTorah in bracha be'echad mishnei panim. So even though you can't call up for an aliyah, a person who's on a balcony across the street, he thinks he has a solution where you could do kriyas haTorah with brachas. Im yesh mishpacha sheyesh ba shlosha gdolim. If there's a family that has 3 adults, could go on avu shnei banim, like a father and 2 sons. So even though we normally don't call an aliyah up son after a father, vice versa, we don't do it because of ayin hara, but but mi'ikar adin you could do it. The Mishnah Berurah kosav the im Allah lo yere. The ain't kapedim is elachatchila. That in fact the Mishnah Berurah says if you do call a son after a father, you don't make him sit down. He can get the aliyah. Uvesharatzion hevi halacha zu miderech hachayim b'shem kama achroinim. He brings this halacha in the names of number of achroinim. And varach hashulchan kosav demit dami Not only that, somebody who's not worried about Ayin Hara can get an aliyah after his father. But the Shulchan Aruch said you shouldn't call him up. Says Rav Weiss, we're in an emergency. It's a shasat chak. We don't want to break the takana of Kriyas Torah, so yesh lakel b'zeh. So this issue, if you have a father and two sons in one house, go ahead and call them up one after another. It's better to have the Kriyas Torah than this worry about this issue. We shouldn't wonder that we haven't seen this in poskim. I mean, in previous history, there wouldn't be a necessity where you'd have to call a brother after a brother. If there's no minyan, there's no Kriyas Torah. Why would you ever have to call a brother one after another? But in our cases, where you have one apartment that has a father and two sons, yesh la'akel. V'nira od midon didan yesh ladun de'ein klal ayin hara kiven sheyefshar b'inyan acher. And we could argue that there's no ayin hara since there's no other way to do it in this situation. Ach be'emet nira de'ein tzarach l'kol zeh. He says you don't have to rely on that either. Ela bal korah ya'alev yivarach v'yazv v'ya'alev yivarach sheva pamim. The bal korah will get 7 aliyahs. Ulkamavor b'tur shulchan aruch. We learned that last time, that if you're in a synagogue where the people don't know how to read, so you shouldn't call anybody up. The Baal Korah should take all the aliyahs. But according to the poskim who say that our custom today is that you call up even Amma Aretz who doesn't know how to read, and he reads with the Shliach Tzibur, and the Gam Suma, you call up even a blind person even though he can't read. Shuv eino agin shebala kora ola v'chozer v'ola ela amei haaretz odem shivas akruim. It would not. He thinks it's still better for the Baal Kriya to get the 7 aliyahs rather than the amei haaretz to get the aliyahs. Ach bikom alakom lo pikbeku betzim aloch mishum kach nir de kach yesh linod benidon nidan. So Rav Osher seems to say, not like Rav Sternbuch, that the Baal Korah should get the aliyahs, and the people who can't read along with the Baal Korah shouldn't get the bracha. The above tshuva of Rav Weiss pertain to the situation where people were not permitted to gather in the same vicinity, but had to daven from separate porches. What is the halacha, though, during the period where people can daven together, either outside or in a shul, like we do at Yavna, but social distancing must be practiced, which is how we do it at Yavna. I'm the Baal Koreh, and the people who come up for Aliyah stand 5 to 6 feet apart. Rav Weiss does permit to receive Aliyot, even though they stand at a distance from the Sefer Torah. He explains that when we rely on those opinions, allowing a blind person to receive an Aliyah and standing at a slight distance from the Sefer Torah still qualifies as approaching and standing near the Sefer Torah, as opposed to standing on a different porch. Says Rav Asher Mikol Makam near the Kivin to Ladas Rabba Poskim. According to the majority of the Poskim of Chol Mishnah Berurah, among them the Mishnah Berurah, Ha'ola Yotze b'di'evid afamena kore, like a blind person. He's Yotze even though he didn't read along. Varei nagul alois games asuma, right? The minig is to call up a blind person. The Kivin shebachshas sakana askinon. We're dealing in a dangerous situation. The Ola should stand distant so he doesn't get infected. Even though he can't read from the Torah. The that he's referring to when he's talking about the porch minion. He says it's not comparable to that. The Kanachen Oilahu Torah. Here he's actually going up to the Torah. He just can't read, and he's like a blind person. Now, Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon also discusses this question regarding porch or yard minyanim, where the Ola is standing far away from the Sefer Torah. In light of the Makaros we saw, he suggests that in this case, perhaps it's preferable to adopt the approach of the Shulchan Aruch that the Baal Korah receive all 7 aliyot. L'or zot nireh, sh'lamrot shaya makam lachshov linog l'kula. You might think that we should be lenient l'fachot l'ashkenazim, because remember the Ramah said you can kind of call a blind person. Harei shalamaisa adif shlo lahakel b'davar zeh. He says it's better not to be lenient. Shenira sherishonim rabim asru, that there were many Rishonim that did not allow a blind person to have an aliyah. Umistaver shechelik ben amatir l'maisa yitir biglal agvas nefesh v'tzar miyuchad shel asuma. Those that were matir the suma, they felt bad for the depression and the pain that the suma had. Davar shebederach klal einenu mashmu'uti kol kach b'mtzir shelanu. And that's not such a pertinent factor in our time with the COVID. Someone's not going to get an aliyah. It's not like the agmas nefesh that a suma would have. Then he says, Yesh lo sifot shtei nekudot. Achat, shebimikresh shelanu, hakora enenu omed liyada ola. The person being called up for the aliyah is not standing next to the Baal Korah. The Bala Eshkol, in the Sefer HaEshkol, Shua Yesod Lahatir, who was the original source that the blind person could have an aliyah, Sover Shenitin Lahatir L'Sum L'Vorach Kasher Koreh, Aval Madgish Adam HaKoreh B'Torah Ro'eh U'Mevarech V'Omed B'Tzido. He says, normally, somebody called up should see, make the bracha, and stand by his side. The Chatan Suma, now if the Suma is a Chatan Lo Efshar L'Meitin Le Sefer Torah, he said you should not call a Suma up. The Maisa Tol Ba'almahu, it's like it's a bizoyon, it's an embarrassment. It's not Suma Lo Yikra B'Torah. It says in the Beferish Mishnah that a blind person should not read in the Torah. V'achikram Lo Yikra Al Peh. He should not be reading by heart while the person, the Baal Korah, is reading it from the Chsav. The Kaimelon Devarm Shebechsav Yatar Shalom Ramal Peh. You're not allowed to say things Baal Peh that are written. But if somebody else is going to stand sort of next to the blind person, who's going to see and read while the blind person makes the bracha, that's permitted. We see from all this that the blind person is standing next to the Baal Korah. So the Baal Koreh has been appointed as a shaliach with the suma standing next to him. Kloimar, Hamida Smucha, standing next to the Baal Koreh, Hoifechas Otam Lemechuborim. So Rav Rimon says they become like connected. And it's through that means that the suma is fulfilling his obligation. So he's adding to what Rav Sternbuch said. It's not just that the shomea is hearing and therefore he's like speaking it and reading it. Shari kulam shomim. The whole kahal is listening. Elatzorch shetielo shaychut to the aliyah, and therefore by standing next to him, he's like being mischaber to him. Even though it's hard to say, okay, we have to demand that happen. There's still another doubt. B'din shegam hu mesupek. The halacha is mesupek here. Kan ra'iti shadas Rav Agona Rav Weiss shemida shela oile she'ena roes haksav liyadakar me'akeves. Right? We learned tonight that Rav Asher Weiss said if you don't stand next to the Baal Korah, you can't have an aliyah. So it's a suffix in halacha there. So he says this issue of not having a connection with the Baal Korah is a problem. He says prat lekach, another issue, kishies oftzia acheres, when there's another option, muskemet, that is agreed to yesh latifosa. And yesh la yer binyan zeh shelachura lo kulam iskimu im apsak shel shavu shebo balakore yale b'atzmo sheva pamim. He says not everybody agreed to the psak that the balakor should get 7 aliyahs. Hamishtabur koisav posak at shulchan aruch she'oila echad yale. But the Mishnah said that one person could get all the aliyahs. Matim l'shitas shulchan aruch she'amaretz eina ola. In a case, for example, if you're in a shul where there's only Amei Haaretz, he said you shouldn't call them up. Ulam, lefi psaka Ramosh Malim Amaretz. But the Ramo said you do call up an Amaretz, Lamrot she'inenu yodei l'kriv, no, he can't read. In tzarich lalois adam echad kama pamim. You don't have to call up one person many times. V'nitin lalois Amaretz, you can call up an Amaretz. Lamrot, even though he can't read, she'inenu korah. Omnam, hamishaber eina choy like klal halachtit alatzah shebo yala oila echad sheva pamim. The Mishnah didn't have a problem with one guy getting all 7 aliyahs. Says Rav Rimon, Lachein bar l'sfardim, for Sfardim yesh ladif shebalakor yikra sheva pamim. Says the Shulchan Aruch said it, so the Sfardim have no problem. The balakor should read it 7 times. V'kivan shegam la'ashkenazim pitaron zeh tov. He says for Ashkenazim it should be a good solution as well. Nachon liyitzur pitaron echad lekulam. And he says for Klal Yisrael, we should say that should be the custom. We shouldn't have one shul doing it this way, one shul doing it another way. We should all do it the same way. The Lola Fatzelt Am Yisrael B'Psak Nosaf Lo Tzarich, divide Klal Yisrael with another problematic, machlokas and psak. V'prat kasher yesh le minyanim uravim b'Sfardim v'Ashkenazim. Particularly, there's a lot of our minyanim have both Ashkenazim and Sfardim. That's Rav Rimon. So. Now, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, the current Sephardic chief rabbi, the son of Rav Avadia, suggests a number of different options for conducting Kriyas Torah. His preferred choice is to plan ahead who will receive each aliyah and have them prepare to read it themselves, even if each one reads only 3 psukim, in which case the balakor can receive the last aliyah and read the remainder of the parsha. He also suggests an option of using 2 Sifrei Torah, or having the balakor receive all the aliyot. So, Lor Achiyuv B'Shmir Sanefesh, because we have to watch our health. Yesh linog b'Mishnah Zehirus b'Shas Kriyas HaTorah shemitzuya sakana b'yoter. Kriyas HaTorah, where people congregate closely, so there's the biggest danger there. V'yakpidu b'Yeser Se'es, we have to be very careful. Al kisui ha'af ve'apeh karoi, they should cover the nose and the mouth. Gama Ola v'Gama Koreh, the one who comes up, the one who reads. Umachma shetzrichim lishmor al merchak 2 meter ben ish l're'eyu, that's about 6 feet. Yesh linag al pi seder ha'adifut l'alon. So Rav Yitzchak Yosef says like this: Haderech ha'mucher biyoter lodia kodem ha'Shabbos l'chol oilas aliyaso. Give everybody information before Shabbos about their aliyah. Kedei sheyachin v'yikra be'atzmo. The lo yamod af adam betoch 2 meter elav. He'll be called up. He'll read his 3 psukim. Nobody will be next to him. And fertig. L'kach limnoch shasakona b'karvut ha'korah v'olah. That's one shot. Im kasher la'olim la'achin aliyah shlema. If it's hard for the people who have not been laning all the time, and it's hard for them to prepare a whole aliyah, Yuchlu shisha olim likro kol echad shlosha psukim. So the first 6 aliyot, each could read 3. So you have 18 psukim. You should stop where you're supposed to stop and not stop where you're not supposed to stop. They should prepare it before Shabbos. And he reads Shvi, the rest of the parsha. The Yikra Levado Akol Ad Sofa Parsha V'Lo Yamod Ish Liyado. That's the second option. Then he says, Kasher Olim L'Tor Lo Yicholim L'Kro B'Atzmam. If they cannot read the Torah for themselves, Yicholim L'Hotzi Beis Sifrei Torah. He says, take out 2 Sifrei Torah. Ve'Ola Yishtamesh B'Sefer Torah Echad. Ve'Hakoyer B'Sefer Torah Sheni B'Merchak echad masheni. What he's saying is the guy who gets the aliyah will read his aliyah from the second Sefer Torah. The Baal Korah reads from one Sefer Torah, and the Ola reads from the other Sefer Torah. He says, "L'chatchila ein lino kain b'chtei shikaru mitoch oso sefer." He says, "L'chatchila we shouldn't do this b'chtei shikaru mitoch oso sefer." V'gam machmas kovad Sefer Torah ach b'itgavruta magefa yesh lakel b'zeh mikurach hashah. He says, ideally, this is not proper, but you can be lenient because of the danger. Hamavarech yira mokam akriya, the one who's getting the aliyah sees where it's where the reading is going to happen. The Yochaz Sefer Torah Shel Yod V'Yirach, he makes a bracha. The Yikra B'Lachas Mashat Zakor Ma Sefer Hasheni. The Baal Korah is reading from the other sefer, and the guy who gets the aliyah reads quietly from his sefer Torah. If those options are not good, he says that you give the Baal Korah the 7 aliyahs. All of this is so that the people won't stand close to each other. Now, if you can't do any of these, you shouldn't read. You shouldn't be lenient regarding the distancing. We should wait until the pandemic passes. And then, even if we miss many Shabbosim regarding Kriyas Torah. Rav Willig.
It's interesting that this was written last year about the same time as now, so about a year ago. And last year, I think most people did not anticipate that this will be continuing even now. They thought, okay, maybe a couple more weeks, a month. I wonder if his sock would be a little different if it was, if he knew it was gonna be a much longer period of time.
Right. Well, things are opening up a little bit, so we'll see. But we're still conducting ourselves basically like this, where the aliyahs, where the Ola doesn't stand next to the Baal Korah. So I think the various psukim we've learned are still very relevant, even the way we're doing it now. Interesting. I davened in Sharei Tzedek, and they daven inside now, and the men sit apart, and they had the Ola stands apart. I had an aliyah, and you stand apart from the Baal Korah. Same thing. They have like a plastic divider, and even though they've gotten back in, even though they're back inside, they're still the Kriyas Torah is still being done this way.
Yeah, it's a lot of places do it that way. But a lot of places do it actually that way. And
Yeah.
I got on Leo this morning at Cherry Tzedek exactly that way.
Right.
But many places have that. I was in Texas and also New York in the last few Shabbosim, and both had the same arrangement.
Right. Okay. Rav Mordechai Willig, a Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University, rules that the proper practice is for one person to receive all 7 aliyot and recite the brachos before and after each aliyah. The Kriyas Torah K'shiyav Sham Mishum Sakona Lioter Mechad Lageshes Sefer Torah Nira Shiyasu K'Shulchan Aruch K'Shein Rak Echad Shiodeh Likros. Like the Shulchan Aruch that says when there's only one person in shul who knows how to read, he Shivarcha Kol Aliyah Lefanev L'Achreach. He's called up for each aliyah. He makes a bracha before, makes a bracha afterwards. Uviprat b'mir peset, when you're on a porch, she'en lam acher rishus likanes, nobody else is allowed to go in. Or she'odin merosh lekol ola, or you could tell every aliyah person yachina aliyah shelo v'ikra b'atzmo, k'mosh nagu b'zman haGemara. Where the time of the Gemara, everybody read his own parsha. Dulokim and agenu sheshatz, not like we have Baal Kriyas. Look at Siman Kuf Mem Aleph, the source for that. And of course, normally the Ola stands by the Shulchan. Of course, you shouldn't do that. You should go back to your seat right away. To summarize, there seems to be 4 different approaches. Rav Sternbuch says you can recite the bracha even if you cannot see the Torah, and even if he's standing in a different courtyard. Rav Asher Weiss permitted reciting the bracha even though one cannot see the Torah, but only in a case where the person approaches the Torah and stands at a slight distance from the Torah, like we do. Rav Rimon and Rav Willig hold that in both cases, it's preferable that one person receives all the aliyot and recites the brachos each time. Rav Yitzchak Yosef suggests that each Ola read his entire aliyah, or 6 people read 3 psukim each, and the rest of the parsha should be read by the Baal Koreh. If this is not possible, 2 Sifrei Torah should be used, one for the Ola, one for the Baal Koreh. If this is not an option, then the Baal Koreh should receive all the aliyot and recite the brachos for each aliyah. What about holding on to the Atzei Chayim with the wooden poles of the Torah when reciting the brachos? What's the source for this practice? It's brought by the Tur, who cites the Rishon, the Baal Hamor. Because of Baal Hamor, Shakoysa b'Torah Mavarich ba Noitla b'Yodo the Somach Leminig Ma'id Sukkah. He holds the Torah with his hands, and the source is from the Gemara in Sukkah. Kachaya minagam shel Anshe Yerushalayim. Adam Yotzim Pesach. So when a Yerushalmi would leave his home on Sukkot, lulav biyado, he would carry his lulav. Araya kar b'Torah. Now he'd have to put his lulav down when he got called up as an aliyah, or v'nosei kapav, or if he's a kohen he's duchening. In those cases, meinicho al gabi karka. You can put the lulav down. Alma, we learn from here, says the Tur, shetzarach lito l'sefer biyado b'shas kriya. Otherwise, why do you have to put the lulav down? So it must be you put the lulav down in order to hold on to the Atzei Chayim. Now, the Beis Yosef, in his comments on the Tur right here, right, Rav Yosef Karo, the Baal HaShulchan Aruch, is the main mafaresh of the Tur. He notes that a number of other Rishonim mentioned holding the Sefer Torah as well, while reading and reciting the bracha. And he cites another proof from a Gemara in Megillah. Because of Rav Yah. Rav Yah is a Rishon. Mekublani shebeshas habracha oiches b'amudei haTorah. Rav Yah says that when the time you make the bracha, you hold on to the poles of the Torah. V'od raya, he says another proof, Sof Perek Bnei Ha'ir in Megillah, Ton Rabbanon, poiseach v'roeh. That means he has to, when he's called up to make the aliyah, he opens and sees. Mashma de kol echad poiseach betchila, the gola b'sof. From that language, it's mashma that each person opens up the Sefer Torah and then closes it himself. Well, you can't open it and close it unless you're holding on to the Atzei Chayim. Ad kan l'shonei. V'chein kosav Orchos Chayim. The Orchos Chayim also had a zeh l'shon tzarech hakor b'Torah lechos ki'ilu kiblo achshav mar Sinai. He has to hold on to the Sefer Torah as if he received it. It says b'Bereishis Rabbah lo yomer Sefer Torah zeh mipicha. That's a pasuk in Yoshua. Malamit shayah Sefer Torah biyodo shel Yoshua. She'in lo yomer hazeh l'misha toifes hachafetz. When he says the Sefer Torah should never leave your hands, he's learning that Yoshua said it. He must have been holding the Torah then. So the Shulchan Aruch, right, the same Beis Yosef who eventually wrote the Shulchan Aruch, codifies this practice of holding the Torah while reciting the brachos, and the Mishnah Berurah clarifies it. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Lamed Tes, Hakor b'Torah tzarech lechos b'Sefer Torah b'shas bracha. Says the Ramah, v'samchu min hagzel ma shenemar b'Yoshua. They base it on the pasuk in Yoshua, lo yomer Sefer Torah zeh mipicha, chazak ve'ematz. We said nagul lo yomer l'misayim likros b'Torah b'chol pam chazak. So now the Ramah gives us why when we finish each Sefer, Breishis, Shmos, we say Chazak, Chazak, v'nis Chazek. Because immediately after it says, Lo Yomer Sefer Torah Zeh, Mipicha, Chazak ve'ematz. Because Chazak ve'ematz follows the concept of Sefer Torah. By the way, after the Sfardim, I remember Moshe Tabush and Englenoff and what the guy the antique dealer in Yavna, what Rabbi Simon?
Shimon ben
Shimon.
Chaim.
This is in fact the common Sephardic custom to say Chazaku Baruch, while we say Yasher Koach. But they say Chazaku Baruch because of this concept of Chazak Ve'matz after Lo Yomer Sefer HaTorah Zeh. Very nice to see that.
Ernie, isn't on the same hand, the Sephardim, they do hold on to the Sefer Torah with one hand on the case while they're having the Aliyah?
You mean the Sephardic Sefer Torah?
Yeah, that's what it's referring to. Maybe that's what the Beis Yosef is referring to.
Yeah, because he doesn't talk about holding on to the poles. He
Yeah.
talks actually about holding on to the Sefer Torah itself. Okay, but we saw other people said that you hold on to the Atzei Chaim. Okay, but in
By the way,
the Sephardic Torahs don't have an Atzei Chaim. They have that case. Says
By the way, the correct response in Sfardim, like we say Ashikof, the response is Brachim Tiyu. The Sfardim, they say Chazak Baruch. The correct response is Chazak V'amatz. That's what they say to each other.
So there you go. It's even more of a direct correlate to the source that the Ramah brings. Oh, so when somebody says Chazak Baruch, you've heard Sfardim respond Chazak V'amatz.
That's the correct response. You say
Are you
Chazak
sure that's the other way around?
The response is Chazak V'amatz.
Are you sure it's not the way around?
No, that's
No,
what
it's
it is.
Chazak Baruch and then Chazak Ve'matz. Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, very nice. We see the source for all of this. And if somebody asks us, where is the source for Chazak v'nis Chazek? We now know. It's the Ramah in Kuf Lamed Tes from the Pasuk of Sefer Yoshua, from which we learned also just within this year, that Pasuk. We have to find out, we have to look in the Musar Nevi'im what we said about that when we learned that Pasuk. What does the Mishnah Berurah say? Hainu di yochaz b'amudei Sefer Torah. So of course the Mishnah Berurah is talking to his Ashkenazim. We hold on to the Atzei Chaim, like Bernie pointed out, not mamish to the Sefer Torah. Va'ayin bebach the Taz, sheskimu de be'esa kriyat tzarach gam kein lechos b'Sefer Torah. Now, very interesting. You're supposed to, at least with one hand, because the oil cannot hold on with both hands while the Balkor is laning. But you are supposed to hold on at least with one hand to the Atzei Chaim while the Kriya is going on, according to the Bach and to the Taz. So these sources, and the fact that the Gemara does not formulate it as an obligation, indicate that holding the Atzei Chaim, the Sefer Torah, is based on minig, does not invalidate the Kriyas Torah. Since holding the Torah during current times could potentially spread the virus, it seems that it can be temporarily waived. This is supported by the fact that the contemporary poskim don't even feel the need to elaborate on this. Now, in Yavna, they hand out gloves.
Hey.
So could be that that's not even required because you probably don't even have to hold on based on the sources we've learned today. Okay, 147. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has affected many areas of Jewish life, both communal as well as strictly halachic issues. Even such day-to-day halachot as the laws of brachot have been affected for some people. In this year, we will begin to discuss some of these halachic issues in the realm of brachos, including brachos before eating, shechiyan, and birchas hagomel. So one of the minor symptoms experienced by many who have been infected with COVID is the loss of taste and smell. Would one still be required
Happy, come here.
to recite a
Yeah.
bracha rishona
Come here.
upon eating if he cannot detect the taste of the food? May he recite the bracha of bor minei besamim if he cannot smell the spices normally. So let's look at the Gemara in Brachos that famously states that it's forbidden to derive benefit from this world without reciting a bracha, based upon svara, logic. Rashi explains that the logic referred to is the one that must express gratitude to Hashem upon receiving anah from eating. So, Minah and Amili, how do we know you have to make a bracha? El svarahu. Asr lo la'adam sheyenem min olam hazeh b'lo bracha. A person cannot have benefit from this world without a bracha. Ton Rabbanon, Asr lo la'adam sheyenem min olam hazeh b'lo bracha. V'chol hanenem min olam hazeh b'lo bracha mo'al. There's another language, Chazal goizel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Somebody who eats something without a bracha, it's like you're a thief. Rashi, Elasvaru de kiva denena tzarch lahodas lamisha bara. The bracha is the thankfulness to the one who created the food. Now, the benefit that Rashi is referring to, what is it? Is it nourishment? Maybe it has nothing to do with taste. Since the food is nourishing you, keeping you alive, so then whether you could smell it or taste it doesn't make a difference. You still need to make a bracha. Does it refer to the fact that the food tastes good, or the benefit derived from being satiated after eating? The Gemara in Chulin cites a dispute within the context of the laws of non-kosher food that seem to touch on this point. According to Rav Yochanan, one who divides a piece of forbidden food, one who places a piece of forbidden food in his mouth, like Aver Menachai, or he divides it into two pieces that are both smaller than a kazayas, where there's no liability, he still is chayiv, because when one swallows it, he swallows a kazayas of it in total. Rish Lakish though argues that he's exempt because his stomach did not benefit from the kazayas at one time. Remember, he divided it into two pieces in his mouth, and he swallowed it in two swallows. So, now, if he had an Aver Menachai and divided that piece into two pieces while it was outside his mouth, and he ate both pieces separately, then certainly he's potter. What if he divided it in his mouth? Because his mouth, basically, we're going to see, tasted the whole thing, the whole kazayas. His throat, his sensory glands, which are on the tongue and the back of his mouth, his taste buds benefited from the kazayas. Reish Lakish says potter, because achila b'meyav ba'inen, you need a kazayas to go down in one piece to your stomach. And since it only went down half a kazayas, it was not nene. So it would seem that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish argue about whether the key component of hana is considered the enjoyment derived by one's mouth and taste buds, or is it the hana derived in one's stomach, i.e., the fact that one is satiated, or the concept that the food has nutritional benefit. Which of these is the key element regarding brachos? So many poskim, including the Eglei Tal, the Shachat Shavar, argue that the key component of benefit is hanos meyayim. It means the nutrition, the nourishment, the satiation. Lin bracha shalafonov, totally gamkein banos meyav levad. The Eglei Tal wants to say that the bracha before eating something is based on the hana of the stomach. Shari mita'amat, someone who just tastes something, ain't tzarich bracha b'toim ufoiling. Let's say you're tasting wine. You take a sip and you spit it out. You taste a dish to see if it's too salty or not, and spit it out. The halacha is you don't make a bracha. Because of Magen Avraham, in Reish Yud, Yishum Deina Nikra Hanoah B'toch Meyav. Hanoah is it's got to get down to your stomach. Vatam is a borish or a bracha lefanei alon to become a chomer. The whole inyan, right? We have two brachas written in the Torah, Birchas HaTorah and Birchas HaMazon. Uverachta achalta v'sovata uverachta. So the concept of brachos before eating is learned from a kal v'chomer from the after bracha. There it's clearly v'sovata, right? V'achalta v'sovata, you were satiated. So the Eglei Tal is learning, since in more brachas they ask, minayin lebracha beforehand, it's because kal v'chomer from brachas afterwards, means if you make a bracha, when you're satiated, al achas kam v'kam, you should make a bracha before you eat. And that bracha is only made with satiation. So another discussion that may also support this conclusion in our case concerns one who is not specifically interested in eating only for that purpose. Shulchan Aruch rules, as explained by the Mishnah Berurah, that one who eats only as a means to cure an illness, even if he does not particularly want to eat, must still recite a bracha rishona and bracha achrona. The Ramah rules, though, that one who is actually forced to eat against his will, as opposed to deciding to eat on one's own, but not because one is hungry, does not recite a bracha. If the doctor has prescribed the old famous cod liver oil we used to as kids, who wanted to eat that, right? But the doctor prescribed it. Now, cod liver oil doesn't have a good taste. Let's say it had a good taste, right? In tamam tov, and you know your palate benefit from it. Even if you don't really want to eat, but the doctor told you to eat it. Says the Ramah, imansu lechol, but if somebody puts a funnel down your throat and forces you, olishtos, afagav da'achech nena mimenu, even though you might have enjoyment while going down, and mavarech alav oil v'nenas lakach. He's forced to do it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, in tamam toiv, ritzoyin lomer afal pi she'eno ta'ev lahem. Meaning, it doesn't make a difference whether it tastes good or tastes bad. He doesn't want to eat at all. He's only eating because he's sick. He's been told he's got to eat. His palate benefits. To exclude the case, for example, let's say the food is bad. There's no, not all. So then he doesn't make a bracha. So the Piskei Tshuva explains that although the sources here refer to anos chayich, which seems to be the palate, not the stomach, in truth, this refers to any benefit received by the body. Therefore, it seems from here that anyone who does not enjoy the taste of a certain food but eats it anyway, for medicinal purposes, or because he realizes that the food is nutritious and important for him, should recite a bracha. V'lachein, im ein achila neged ritzono. Let's say it's not against his will to eat. He wants to eat. He knows he wants to eat. Without eating, he's going to die. He's got a very bad appetite because of his illness. Here's the Piskei Tshuva saying somebody who's lost the sense of taste. He doesn't taste anything. He must make a bracha on eating and drinking. His intestines are still benefiting, i.e. nutritionally. For this reason, one who eats spinach, for example, because he knows it's healthy, but he cannot stand the taste, recites the bracha. Likewise, one who has lost the sense of taste due to COVID will also cite a bracha. Rav Asher Weiss also rules this way in a tshuva specifically addressing COVID. He explains that anytime one eats in a normal manner, such that the body derives benefit, and a person chooses to eat, one recites a bracha on it.
Ernie, somebody would then, what he's saying, somebody would then have to make a bracha when he's got a drip.
A drip? What do you mean a drip?
Yeah, somebody's got a they
or
put
even
in
a feeding tube.
a feeding tube or a drip, where they basically put in for water.
They get nutrition.
Yeah, would you have to make a bracha?
If it he's not eating. If it's going down a tube, I'm not sure we can call that eating. Like if he has a stomach tube directly, a G tube, or even through his nose, his stomach is benefiting, but you can't say that he's eating. There's Tzvika has a I'll have to look that up. I'm not sure you make a bracha on it.
So we say in Berachas Hamazon, v'yachalta v'sovat, if somebody's just being fed.
But he survived.
Why does he make a bracha?
Certainly he's getting his nutrition.
He's getting sustenance.
Absolutely is getting nutrition.
That may be what is meant by if the eating is not against his will. I mean, what else could mean? What else could against his will mean?
Well, remember, let's say somebody forces a fight, they're torturing you. You know, they put a
Okay.
funnel down there. That's how I was learning Pshat.
You think that's
but
what it means? That someone's torturing you,
the
you want
guy,
to make a bracha?
Yaakov, the guy who has an NG tube or a G tube, he's actually happy. He wants to be fed. So, but the question is, if there's no Hanos Grono, according to what the Piskei Tshuva said, that even without Hanos, even if you have no sense of taste, you still have to make a bracha because your stomach, maybe according to that Pshat, you have to make a bracha.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But the problem is like this, Walter. People are fed continuously with a G tube. I mean, I'm talking about it goes in every hour. It's so what do you see? You wake up in the morning when you.
No, I'm just saying. Okay, so when they put it in, he has to make a bracha or something. In other words, there has to be.
No,
I'm not
there's
sure.
There's a psak. We just don't have it yet. We'll see. There's going to be a psak. Whether does someone make a bracha, and how frequently do you have to make that bracha? If you do have to make that bracha, you have to do it every morning when you wake up. Because remember, the feeding happens automatically. You know. By the way, unfortunately, a lot of people who are on a state where they need a tube are not making brachas. They're in coma. They don't have the ability to make a bracha.
No, but I mean, I'm
that's
not
why they're
talking
being
about
fed
that.
by a tube.
Talking about somebody's okay, but he needs a drip. He needs a tube. He needs something. But he's
so by the way,
lucid.
IV is not eating. That your GI tract is not benefiting. So you would not make a bracha on IV hydration. So, but the question is, as you said, if someone has a G tube or an NG tube, will a bracha have to be made? I will send. I'm close to Avram Steinberg. You know the editor of the medical encyclopedia. So I will send him an email. He'll probably give us a very quick answer, and I'll try to send it out to everybody about that issue, or I'll find it in my own research in his form. But it could be that based on this Piskei Tshuva, even though if you eat something you don't have a sense of taste, it ends up in your stomach, you have to make a bracha. Maybe it's the same for them. Let's see what Rav Usher says about the corona. That one of the symptoms is you lose your sense of taste. Forget about a regular bracha. What about achilas matzah? Kasher enu margish b'hem kol tam. Hinesh yesh lodem b'shela zu. The gabi bracha saneni. Ach kvar nitbor b'divrenu le'el. The nidon didan shaper avi derech achila. When you're eating it, it's a derech achila. Kivin she'oichel kedarkan shalabrias. You hear what his language is? This is going to rule out a G tube. It's not achila kedarkan shalabrias. However, achilaso chiyunis lebrioso l'chayav, and he needs the eating. Vemes tiazu tzmiya rav silomer sheish shemach masmach le'enu margish tam b'meichel lo yivarch al ha'oichel kol mechayav. He says it would be very strange if somebody doesn't taste his taste, doesn't have good taste, sense of taste, he would never make a bracha in his life. Cannot be. But this concept of derech achila and kedarkan shalabrias may exclude the questions you asked about the G tubes. What about loss of smell in the bracha on psamim? And we'll conclude with this. May one who has lost a sense of smell recite the bracha of borim and psamim. If not, what should one do on Motzei Shabbos for smelling psamim? Since in this case there's no benefit other than the actual smell, there's more reason to argue that one who has lost a sense of smell should not recite a bracha. The Shulchan Aruch states that one who cannot smell does not recite a bracha on psamim, and is exempt from smelling on Motzei Shabbos. However, it adds that if one is reciting the bracha on behalf of other household members as well, one may still recite the bracha and have them smell the psamim immediately after his bracha. Your wife is standing next to you. Women don't make Havdalah in general, or ketanim, and you make the bracha and they smell it. The Mishnah Berurah notes that the consensus of the Achronim is that such a person may not recite a bracha for another adult, but only for his children. Kol Achronim cholkin al zeh, The Achronim argue with the Shulchan Aruch. The Soivrin Davka Lahotzi Bnei Beis Aktanim, who Deshari. Only then is it permitted to make the bracha. Shemutal alav kedei lachanchem b'mitzvahs. He has to make the bracha to teach them that you can't smell without making a bracha. Avalol lahotzi misheni yodeya. You should not make a bracha for somebody, an adult. Kivan shu eno chayev b'dover. Eno yochel lahotzi acher midei chovaso. He cannot be yotze another adult because he's not chayiv in the mitzvah because he can't smell. So it's like someone who's not a bar chiyuv to blow shofar cannot be motzi somebody else. He's got to have the chiyuv to blow the shofar in order to be motzi somebody else. Based on this, how would a person who has temporarily lost the sense of smell, either because you have a cold or the COVID-19, how do you recite the bracha? The Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, Rav Neuvert, explains that one should have another adult household member recite the bracha for him, and that person have in mind to fulfill everyone's obligation for psomim, though that other person need not recite the Havdalah for everyone. The other person will just make the psomim bracha. Misha eno meiriach, gon shehu mitzunan, he's got a cold. Lo yivarch berachas psomim. Gam bedaito lo tzis bnei beiso shem yarichu b'psomim. Even if he had in mind to be motzi the other people, he shouldn't do it. Another adult in the house, it can't be a child because the child can't be motzi the other people either. So another adult in the house has to have kavanah to be motzi. And of course, to be motzi even the mavdil. And he should smell a little bit if maybe something will come through. He can make the bracha for the ketanim, even though he's not smelling. As long as they don't know how to do it themselves. If they know how to do it themselves, you should do it only afterwards. You drink the wine, because it may be a bracha shenet tzricha, and therefore it's going to be mafsik. I think that's what it's worried about. Okay, so next week we'll talk about shechianu. Upon seeing somebody who's been recovered from, you have to make a shechianu, or when you see somebody, what about the people who recovered? Do they have to make a birchas hagomel? And we'll also learn some of the dinim regarding masks. I think we'll do that next week. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Have a good week.
Yeah.
We will.
Thank you.